That should wake us up. Tēnā koutou te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Tēnā koutou, nā mana hearing. No mai, haere mai. Haere mai ki tēnei whare karakia a te atua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. As we enter this sacred silent space, let us renew both our commitment and our covenant. There are those among us who have endured a loss in the past week. May their hope be uplifted again in this community of faith. There are those among us who have struggled with hardship in the past week. May they find renewed strength in this community of faith. There are those among us who have wrestled with questions that seem to have no answer in the past week. Maybe they find sanctuary during their search in this community of faith. There are those among us who have cherished an unexpected joy in the past week. May their rejoicing be celebrated in this community of faith. As we commit to continue our free and responsible search for truth, may we covenant to honor the many paths that have led us to this community of faith. So may it be. We welcome you today if you're here for the first time. We know that threshold, that front door can be pretty intimidating to walk through, not knowing for sure what's on the other side. We commend your courage. We also assure you that you can relax. Nothing untoward will be asked of you. But we do hope you'll stay for morning tea. We don't have many sacraments in the Unitarian tradition, but one of them is our sacrament of hospitality. That is morning tea. It is a time we can welcome you informally. For my opening words, I've turned to Maya Angelou. We, this people on this small and drifting planet, whose hands can strike with such abandon that in a twinkling life is sapped from the living. Yet those same hands can touch with such healing, irresistible tenderness. We, this people on this wayward floating body created on this earth, of this earth, we have the power to fashion for this earth a climate where every man and every woman can live freely without sanctimonious piety, without crippling fear. We, this people in whose mouths abide cankerous words, which challenge our very existence, yet out of those same mouths come songs of such exquisite sweetness that the heart falters in its labor and the body is quieted into awe. When we come to it, to the day of peacemaking, we must confess that we are the possible, we are the miraculous, the true wonder of this planet. We light the flame to honor our fourth principle. How better to affirm and promote a free and responsible search than to provide a marketplace for those who are searching to share the fruits of their quest. Sorry, I'm a little more clogged up than usual today. I never know when the building is going to attack me. This seems to be one of those mornings. In 1964, I was 15, living in a remote community high in the Colorado Rockies. It had been a tough year. We were still in grief over the assassination of JFK. we were beginning to grow more concerned about our increasing involvement in Vietnam's Civil War. But we had our diversions. The Beatles had just taken the U.S. by storm. We just wanted to hold their hand and forget our troubles. Where I lived, we were pretty isolated. We could almost ignore the rest of the world. But as we were preparing to get ready for the local fall and college high schools football seasons, even our two channels couldn't leave us in peace. September 1st, we began getting news reports of student unrest at the University of California, Berkeley. This was something new. As both my parents had attended Berkeley, it caught our attention. News media and general public opinion were not positive. The students were demanding free speech. Of all the nerve. They must be unpatriotic, troublemaking communists. General support was with the university's efforts to stop their efforts to organize political demonstrations outside the gates of the university. They were accused of irresponsible free speech and not following the rules of those in power. The next 3 months, as mass demonstrations, mass arrests, and student boycotts followed, I had my first symposium in what free speech meant and what it cost to have it. One of the lessons I learned is that the more those in power seek to restrict free speech, the more it will backfire. By the time Berkeley's free speech movement ended, free speech had become institutionalized at Berkeley, and universities around the country had liberalized their own rules to protect it. Over the intervening years, I learned that free speech had a long, complicated history that has nuanced what it is, who it can express it, what, if anything, limits it, and doesn't really exist in our tribal society. In the time I have this morning, all I can offer you is a thin slice to the discussion, hardly better than a clever retort on a placard at a free speech rally. But it may be worthy of an adult RE course sometime. Let me know at morning tea if that would appeal. I speak to the issue this morning as has become topical in Auckland with the recent decision of the Auckland Council to not allow 2 Canadians with far-right views regarding multiculturalism, feminism, and immigration to use one of their venues. The council cited security issues. The sponsors of the Canadians eventually hired a private venue, which canceled their event on the night due to public controversy. On the heels of which, former National Party leader Don Brash was uninvited to speak on free speech at Massey University due to security concerns. This led to Auckland University to invite speakers on both sides of the issue to debate free speech, as they had not received the same threats as Massey. One of the speakers, Don Brash, received considerable heckling during his efforts to claim political correctness was hampering free speech. The political right was feeling their free speech was being seriously infringed. The political left was arguing that free speech did not include hate speech. There is an even more important reason I'm speaking to this issue this morning to you, Unitarians. Our history is steeped in the issue of free speech. We are part of the free church movement, which has always held up the idea of a free pulpit. It goes back to 1568, when King John Sigismund, the first and last Unitarian king, proclaimed in the Act of act of religious tolerance and conscience. In every place, the preacher shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to his understanding of it. And if the congregation like it, well, if not, no one should compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied. Famous Unitarian minister Theodore Parker made it even clearer in an 1841 ordination sermon. His comment on the free pulpit came at the end of the sermon when he spoke to the congregation about how to relate to his new minister. He said, "Truth speaks in 1,000 tongues, and with a pen graves her sentence on the rock forever. You may prevent the freedom of speech in this pulpit, if you will. You may hire your servants to preach as you bid, to spare your vices and flatter your follies, to prophesy smooth sayings and say, 'It is peace,' when there is no peace. Yet in so doing, you weaken and enthrall yourselves. But on the other hand, you may encourage your brother to tell you the truth. You will then have his best words, his brightest thoughts, and his most hearty prayers." This free pulpit understanding is written into any letter of appointment for a Unitarian minister. It is our free church commitment to free speech. While we aren't the only tradition to have a free pulpit, we are overall still in the minority in religious circles. I came here out of the majority. While part of the most liberal stream of Anglicanism, my pulpit was not free until I chose to make it so. It took many years before I was able to find the courage to cross the boundary of dogma and doctrine and tell my congregation fully what I really thought and really believed. I confess to having been terrified the first time I leapt the fence, and then greatly relieved when the congregation breathed a sigh of relief in finally being told my truth and not that carved in stone by the church. There would be consequences, but I have no regrets. Free speech isn't free except maybe in places like here, where we take it for granted. Living in a secular democratic society, we can be forgiven for thinking we have always had freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and always will. But that is hardly the case. In the last 10 years, the number of countries that have a free press has declined from 41% in 2003 to 31% today. There are currently a record 262 journalists being held in prison. And at last count, 21 journalists in Russia have been murdered. Since the trial of Socrates in 399 BCE, our understanding of what is free speech has evolved, and what are its limitations have fluctuated with wars, political upheavals, changes in technology, cultural shifts, religious dogma, and legal challenges. New Zealand's history with free speech offers examples. Early English settlers came here with an understanding of English common law, where free speech had been institutionalized in the Magna Carta, and again in the 1689 Bill of Rights. They might have even been familiar with John Stuart Mill's essay on liberty, arguing for the toleration of different views and individuality, and further arguing that free speech should not be restricted, or should be restricted only if shown to be harmful to an individual. In spite of that, in 1881, Parihaka happened. It was one of the worst examples in our history of shutting down freedom of expression in the most horrendous of ways. What happened was two inspirational Maori leaders, Te Whiri o Ranamai and Tohu Kakai, spoke eloquently about government policies concerning Tangata Whenua, the people of the land, and the loss of their land during the Maori land wars. They were forthright, clear, and nonviolent, but they increasingly got on the government's nerves with their effective exercise of free speech and free expression. The government decided to shut it down for security concerns. The message they were putting out was too dangerous to the public, or at least too uncomfortable for the government. About 1,600 government troops invaded the settlement on the 5th of November, interesting date, 1881. Many women in the settlement were raped and assaulted. The village destroyed. The men sent to the South Island. Oranobai and Kakai were arrested and detained without trial for 16 months. In June of last year, the government apologized, about 90 years later, giving $9 million in reparations and acknowledging they were the villains and not Oranobai and Kakai, who were its heroes. Another instructive moment from our history concerns former Prime Minister Peter Fraser. During World War I, he was imprisoned for sedition, having spoken out against conscription. One of his fellow inmates would later be an associate minister of this congregation, James Chappell, incarcerated for speaking out against our participation in the war. While the right is often seen as the culprit in restricting free speech, by World War II, Peter Fraser was prime minister and took an opposite position. He instituted a regime of censorship during the war. After the war, during the 1951 waterfront strike, Prime Minister Sid Holland, leader of the National Party, justified using Fraser's wartime regulations to break the strike, including shutting down freedom of expression. They, like Hitler and Stalin, supported free speech when it was convenient. Today, the biggest threat in New Zealand and around the world to free speech is expanding Mill's injunction about when it should be limited. Mill's position was warranted only when it caused individual harm. Now it is argued that it should be limited when it causes offense. I marked the Danish cartoon controversy in 2005 as the beginning of this attack on free expression. There were demonstrations around the world after the newspaper published cartoons about Mohammed. Danish advocates for free speech began speaking of the need not to offend. It all came to a head with the terrorist attack on the French satirical magazine, Charlie Hebdo. After it published a cartoon of Mohammed weeping about the jerks that followed him. The publishers were accused of hate speech. We now live in an era when free speech that offends someone can be labeled hate speech and quashed. New Zealand has tried to have it both ways. New Zealand has both held up free speech and opposed hate speech in the Human Rights Act. Under Section 61, it's unlawful to broadcast, publish, or distribute material that is threatening, abusive, or insulting, and likely to excite hostility against or bring into contempt any group of persons in New Zealand on the grounds of color, race, or ethnic or national origins. It's also unlawful to use such language in a public place or even in private, if the speaker knows it's likely the words will be published or broadcast. Section 61 treats such behavior as a civil matter rather than a criminal one, with complaints going to the Human Rights Commission. At present, there are no statutes on the books regarding hate speech. Giving hate speech legal status will have a chilling effect on free speech. Even without that status, it has already had that effect. In a couple of the cases already brought to the Human Rights Commission, it has taken a room full of lawyers to argue whether it is hate speech or just objectionable opinion. I personally have had to deal with the problem of my free speech offending others. When I put a billboard in front of St. Matthew's with the title, "Poor Joseph, God is a Hard Act to Follow," I was inundated with hate mail, much of it offensive, ironically. Complaints were made to the Advertising Standards Authority that I had offended the community. After an extensive investigation, the ASA ruled in my favor. Later, when a second billboard received complaints, they quickly dismissed them. In today's climate, if hate speech was criminalized, I would have to think twice about putting up such billboards, for the world has become tribal. As it was, many of the billboards were defaced or stolen, and on 2 occasions I received death threats that the police took quite seriously and investigated. Clearly, depending on your tribe, your speech should be protected as free speech, and the other tribe's speech should be silenced or prohibited as hate speech. This is why free speech isn't free. To protect and preserve it means having to live with being offended. It means having to confront that which you find hateful in the marketplace of ideas, even sometimes at some risk. It means having to trust that an informed humanity will ultimately reject what is objectionable. It's not by accident that our fourth principle upholds a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Many have died that we might do so and express it freely. For our meditation, free speech has changed the world over and over again. But I invite us to seek silence, to listen before speaking freely. Through the silence, we might hear something worth speaking. I invite you to enter into a time of silence. My closing words are by Gene Olson. May you be brave enough to expose your aching woundedness and reveal your vulnerability. May you speak your deepest truths, knowing that they will change as you do. May you sing the music within you, composing your own melody, playing your song with all your heart. May you draw, paint, sculpt, and sew, showing the world your vision. May you write letters, poetry, biography, slogans, graffiti, the great novel, laying bare your words to love and hate. May you love even though your heart breaks again and again. And until the end of your days, may your life be filled with possibilities and courage.